Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the RubberGum Anime Podcast, where I am the gum and my friend August here is the rubber, and
really fulfilling the namesake today, and we wish we didn't have to.
the oh man. It's been a little while since our last entry. We said in the first week that we weren't exactly having a tight schedule for this, which, living up to that now, but, we're people, we're technically both adults now, so we have things we have to do, so that sucks. But that being said, we still enjoy doing this, and we enjoy delivering content to you. So this week, we are going to be discussing... Isn't it terrible that we're going to be discussing one of our favorite properties in all of fiction, one of our favorite things in the world?
One of the best things ever made, and we're discussing the worst part of it.
Unquestionably, the worst part of it. We are going to be talking about the two Hunter x Hunter, specifically the 2011 incarnation of Hunter x Hunter movies, entitled The Last Mission and Phantom Rogue. I almost said Phantom Ruby. That's I think that's a Sonic the Hedgehog thing. You said fucking
Phantom Blood before we started recording.
JoJo's, Sonic. We are really just scraping the bottom of the barrel here. So we're gonna be talking about those two, and Hunter x Hunter in general, just because it will become abundantly clear very quickly that these movies do not exactly... I was going to elaborate, but these movies do not exactly is a great statement. So yes, they do not. They simply don't. And they don't. I think it's just interesting to talk about them in the context of our relationship to Hunter x Hunter as a whole. Makes for a better discussion. I am H.O. In terms of what I have been watching and reading lately, I have a short segment because I have not been watching fucking anything, nor have I been reading fucking anything, because I have been doing nothing but working, listening to shit for the podcast, and that's it.
I haven't been particularly busy myself, but I've been a bit relatively more busy, because I've watched like 2 anime movies in particular recently. First one being Spirited Away, and that movie's amazing.
Hell yes, we mentioned that in our key discussion. Great film, great little film. I'm looking through to see if I can cheat and see if I've watched any anime movies as of late. And I forgot that I just looked through to my history on Letterboxd, and it was immediately just like, here's every Saw movie, because you're a fucking idiot.
Stupid Saw movie.
You know what? I will cheat here and say that I did... because these are technically from a Japanese studio. It's Japanese animation, so it does count as that I watched 2 of the Hellboy animated movies. Those are pretty solid. They're not as good as the Guillermo del Toro films, but they're fun little movies. They have they have the same vibe as like a good episode of Scooby-Doo, but like animated by a Japanese studio, which means like that's how you know something is good, is when something is not a Japanese property, but it's animated by a Japanese studio. Usually that means they outsourced it and they were like, hey guys, can we like pick some shit up? And so those are good. The Mortal Kombat animated movie, which is not, don't watch that.
Is that the Scorpion one?
That one is cool because the first 10 minutes of it are dope, because it's just like Scorpion's backstory. It's a bunch of people getting violently gored with good animation, and then the rest of the movie is fucking boring. It's like, okay. So that's that.
Other things, the one other thing I'll mention that was a new watch was Pokemon 2000.
Is
second? It's
Lugia?
The one with Lugia.
Oh, that would be a good... Pokemon movies are a treasure trove,
because we have
to dive into those one. Yeah, for the most part, they are they're terrible. I think the one that I liked the most in my recollection is that I think there's a solid Darkrai movie or like the Sinnoh stuff in general. I remember like some of that being good, but I remember specifically I just kind of liked the Deoxys movie because it was basically a kaiju movie where Deoxys and Rayquaza fought, and I remember being 10 and being like, Rayquaza is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of remember enjoying the Entei one. That one wasn't the worst.
Yeah. Oh, what was that one called?
It was the third one. It was like Entei and the Mystery of the Unknown or something.
Yeah, I almost called it Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, but that was oh god, all the Pokemon knowledge is suddenly flooding back into my brain, and now I'm like, oh no, there's so many of these. God, that's a fascinating franchise. Just like on all accounts, like on how the video games are like they range from Saturday morning cartoon plots to almost outlandishly dark stories.
Oh yeah, it's so awesome.
That are just like totally and completely fucked. And then all the movies, which are just like, I don't know, like maybe this is just me looking back with rose-tinted glasses, but like I always remembered the shows, no matter which version of it, being dramatically better than the movies. Not to say that the shows are great,
but the movies have this weird thing where it's like every movie has to be like the biggest event of Ash's life, and it's the same. It's like the same shtick with Mewtwo, fucking Lugia, the Celebi one where he travels back in time and saves the world or some shit.
Oh god. Didn't they make the Celebi movie into some fucking like save the earth shit? Because that was really popular then, and I feel like they were just like, oh, save the rainforest.
Kumbaya.
Yeah. That's a couple of those movies in general.
Yeah.
Is the animation in those particularly good? Because I don't remember like viewing them recently enough to register it.
CGI fart monsters in them, which is not
particularly
good.
Well, that's a bit of a shame, but yeah, we'll talk about Pokemon movies on here eventually. Why not? That sounds like a fun thing.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting going at those from the perspective of me, who has played collectively more Pokemon than like I've done anything else in my life. Like pretty comfortably too. Like I think if you just took Pokemon Emerald, I think that's like a solid 10% of my life. So
sleeping Pokemon Emerald.
It's a toss up, honestly. The only other Japanese thing I watched recently, which was actually pretty good that I almost skipped over, is I watched for the first time the movie Tetsuo the Iron Man. And that movie's fucking dope. Oh, fucking love that movie.
To watch that.
It's it has the vibe of like something that like it has the vibe of like something that like you specifically August would like make. Like it's just got like weird metal shit and stop motion shit, and it's all violent. It's basically like, oh hey, that part of Akira that becomes like a body horror movie, that's the whole thing. And it's got this weird industrial avant electronic soundtrack, and it's violent and weird, and there's a drilled dick. It's great. It's so cool. Just watch like there's no way to like convey like what it is about because it's just so purely visceral. It's 60 minutes long. I watched it with like I got together with Morgan and some of our friends for the first time, and we like sat and watched something. We also watched Maniac Cop starring Bruce Campbell for 10 minutes
before promptly shutting it off, rightfully so.
That movie's not great. It also has a name in it that I recognized from Red Letter Media's Best of the Worst.
I think
the name they mention it's the guy who plays the Maniac Cop.
Shit, I know exactly who it is. He's got like the baseball face.
Yeah, he's got the weird jawline. It's fucking, I'll read it eventually. Robert Zadar. That's
Zadar.
Him. He's in like every B movie fucking ever. He's in Samurai Cop too.
He is. That's I think probably the thing most people know him from.
One of my favorite bad movies, Future War. That as well. I think there's dinosaurs in that. That's wonderful. But yeah, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here for Japanese media. I promise we'll be better weebs in the future.
We most certainly will.
And on the note of being a better weeb in the future, segues, I guess.
Fucking
Hunter. We are pretty big. I was going to look over and grab my copy of Volume 1 of the Hunter manga, but it's not next to me.
I got my own. I can do my own visual example.
Do it. I will just set the stage here. But August and I have already talked extensively about Hunter.
Pretty big Hunter fans.
Yeah, I also own those Blu-rays. I own the exact same ones. I own that. I own the first 3 volumes of the manga, and I've read digital scans of the manga up until, I think, ironically, the Chimera Ant arc. I was just plowing through to get through and like catch up and read it, and then I just had to stop because I was like, okay, I know what happens, but like, I'll come back to this eventually. But obviously, August and I, from the very first episode of this podcast, have proclaimed our love for Hunter being one of our favorite things in all of existence. We very specifically mentioned the Chimera Ant arc being one of our favorite stories ever. And so, you know, naturally, when you see an anime that you love and you see that it has movies, you avoid it like the fucking plague because it's almost never good.
The very best one I can think of is like the Cowboy Bebop movie. And I still think that's like a 6, 7 out of 10.
One of the rare instances I think where we will have a complete rating overlap, and that the Cowboy Bebop movie is great because the animation is very good and it's basically just an extended episode of the show.
But this is also in comparison that 6, 7 out of 10 to the show, which is like a 9.
Yeah, the show's a masterpiece, and generally speaking, that's as good as it gets. Like, even the things that you like, I think this is just sort of a common anime thing, because even your favorite things in the world, no matter how much you love them, even my favorite thing, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, has fucking the Sacred Star of Milos, which,
oh god,
why that movie's that's you know, we're gonna talk about movies like this down the road. I can feel it, especially
way too many of them.
The Full Metal Alchemist ones, and specifically, are just like, I'm not typically someone who thinks that like side material sticking to the canon of the anime is paramount, but if you're the type of person that gets bothered by that, the Full Metal Alchemist movies will drive you fucking crazy. I'm trying to think of like other ones too. There's the Full Metal Alchemist movies. There's
the Trigun movie.
The Trigun movie. There's always recap movies. We've watched the Code Geass movies. We're going to be talking about Evangelion. We're going to be watching
like thousands of Dragon Ball movies.
And literally, like, I think I've seen all of them because of course I have. I think of the 24-ish Dragon Ball movies there are 2 I will confidently say are good, and one is a 6 and the other's a 7. The Broly movie, the most recent one, easily the best one, like by miles, and it's mostly because the animation is great. It has almost nothing to do with the story, but you know,
this is all to establish the broader point that anime movies bad, they are terrible, and if you are ever in the situation where you find yourself scrolling Amazon or in your local anime section of your local Walmart, and you see a movie for a show you like, and it's not like a manga adaptation, avoid it like the plague. It's a terrible investment.
You will save time and money aplenty. I think it's also just like, you know, there is the rare instances of, you know, some anime movies, generally speaking, or at least anime things that are like adapted or spin-offs from something else that are good. There's the Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel movies, which are pretty great. There's things
and Heaven's
like,
Feel, though, the difference there being that's just an adaptation of something that already exists.
So we're still having to scrape, like, the golden era for anime movies was in the 90s, because when Japan's market boomed and we had all this anime being made, and there was just everybody had a shitload of money. Studios were just burning it willy-nilly, is that they made a bunch of OVAs. And those OVAs, be they adaptations or whatever, like even some of them, which are like quality-wise like pretty bad, make up for it in being outlandishly violent, having amazing key animation,
like the
tons
80s
of
and
weird
90s
sex
is where
shit.
this gets just like I can think of just random examples of films like Battle Royale, High School, Ice City, or like just these low hanging bottom of the barrel movies that have amazing animation. Don't
Urotsuki Doji, is that what it's called?
I think that that's definitely one of them. That's one where it's like
Another thing we should totally cover, because that
yeah.
movie is fucking insane. But you know, they had their moment, and I think that basically like once the market for these movies was created in the 90s, the 2000s sort of had this like moment in the medium, I think, where because everything became so popular, commercialized, and successful, you had kind of a commodification in the 2000s where everything became really like market and uh, just sort of driven towards the customer. Like that was when anime got really, for lack of a better word, fetishistic and started pandering to very, very specific niche markets.
Yep.
And basically they discovered like, oh, well, we have properties like Full Metal Alchemist. So if we make movies out of these things, the fans are going to eat it up no matter what. And that has continued to this very day.
Yeah.
These aren't recent. They're both films that are from
2013.
So this is 2 years after Hunter may have started and well off already did a pretty good job of being successful from the get-go.
Yeah.
It had yet to reach its heights by 2013, but it was still doing a good
It
job.
was definitely swiftly getting into those heights, though.
Which definitely is relevant when discussing these two movies, because it is basically impossible to separate them from the anime or to take them on their own terms, because they insist on relating them to Hunter x Hunter in very specific ways. And just to lay the groundwork here, Hunter x Hunter by Yoshihiro Togashi, guy who wrote Yu Yu Hakusho. That's
There
what
we
it's called.
go. The name was failing me too, so don't worry.
Fucking names. I have too many of them in my small head. But he has already done plenty of shit that's worth talking about, and this is the sort of thing that Togashi. He obviously got big off of Yu Yu Hakusho, but infamously, Yu Yu Hakusho kind of petered off because it was really, really successful for a very long time. And then Togashi, as many authors do, suffered like an immense level of like creative block and burnout, because the manga industry in Japan chews people up and spits people out. That is one person, typically, unless you're like a One Piece level like Oda talent who has like a secondhand draftsman do some of the art just because, you know, they can do that. You're a one-man machine.
Or yeah, you're like in the rare cases there's like duos where one person writes and one person draws, like a Death Note. That's a good example of that.
Yes. See the anime, is it Bakuman? Is that what I'm thinking of?
I think that's it. Yeah.
That'll give you a good insight into how sort of the manga industry works and how sort of like partnerships, singular visions go. But he suffered a bit of burnout with that, and he ended Yu Yu Hakusho very bitterly. Not in the sense that like the ending was like he had any animosity. It's just that he ended it like he's with the last issue of that story, he sort of like sent a letter that was like a formal apology because he felt like he botched the ending. And you know, the ending of Yu Yu Hakusho is not bad, but it's definitely like the first third of an arc that's really promising, and then once that first third gets going, it ends. So you can tell that he kind of wanted to come back, and then he did with Hunter x Hunter, which is this huge, enormously sprawling story with tons of ambition. It focuses on, mostly at first, we talk about main character Gon. He's the little guy in green, Gon Freaks, who basically set up here every shonen anime in existence. Little shonen anime boy wants to be the very best, and his dad is gone. Key critical point, because the dad's always gone. And so he wants to become a hunter, and hunters in this universe are just mercenary badasses. They're just people who get shit done, and they have like this all these exclusive freedoms. They have like all this money. Basically, you've just like made it if you can prove to be a hunter, and you do this by going through this long, laborious exam where only a few people survive. And along the way, Gon meets his best friend and life partner, Killua, who is a child assassin who is basically doing this because he's bored. And now that he discovers Gon, who is his first real friend, they go off on adventures after they become, well, after one of them become hunters. And then the series just sort of becomes whatever Togashi wants it to be in every following arc.
It is quite possibly one of the most creative pieces of media ever, because Togashi just has this ability to do about whatever he wants and integrate it into the world in a way where he's blending both a healthy mixture of fantasy and reality, in that while Hunter x Hunter is this fantastical, wonderful story, it deals with so many of the real world complications and implications of this story's, ultimately resulting in many of its darker, more interesting moments. Because what matters in Hunter x Hunter at the end of the day is not the superpowers or the special abilities the character has. It is about breaking down the world in front of you and making intelligent, interesting commentary about not only what implications these characters have for the world they live in, but also some broader social commentary about humanity itself, especially in the Chimera Ant arc is where that comes to a front.
I think the best way I can describe the appeal of Togashi, even in stuff like Yu Yu Hakusho, like, he's a guy who does shonen anime, and we've talked about, like, I'm a bit more of a fan, even though I'm definitely, like, jaded on most of the genre, to be quite honest, is that we're kind of into this genre to varying degrees between the two of us. But Togashi is basically, like, he is operating, he makes Yu Yu Hakusho, which is basically, like, a top-tier shonen who that just sort of acts that way, but it's very smartly written. It's got lots of interesting things in it. And then Hunter x Hunter is just sort of an extension of that philosophy, in that it does act as a shonen, but it's also, you know, people talk about deconstructions, but I wouldn't call Hunter x Hunter a deconstruction. I would just say that it has elements of its story that are in fact deconstructive, where if you grew up watching things like Dragon Ball, like Bleach, like I did, is that you go into this and you have certain expectations for how things are going to happen. And Togashi is great at setting up those expectations the exact same way that they would in any other piece of media, and then pulling the rug out from under you and giving you something entirely different that you didn't know that you wanted. And that's what makes his stories so magical. He's able to take things that could be weaknesses for everyone else and makes them the best part about what he's doing. The world building in Hunter x Hunter could be like, I mean, just thinking about all the stuff that they do could come off as so unorganized and discordant and bad, and each time he introduces something new, it makes it feel like it was there the whole time.
I'd say the world building is such an interesting strength, because he's able to do something magical where he can write the tackiest sounding idea ever and then make it the coolest thing you've ever heard, or the scariest thing you've ever heard.
Yeah, it's also important that we mention, when August says scary, he means that Hunter x Hunter doesn't really show its hand immediately, but it has moments in that first arc where you're just kind of like, that was really fucked up. My God, is that going to keep happening? And boy, tell you, let me just say, it keeps happening. It happens a lot. There are just some instances of, like, I get really involved when a story has the balls to portray death as something like without an ounce of melodrama or gravitas, and just death just like happens. And that happens so many times in this show, particularly one moment at the beginning of the Chimera Ant arc, which just legitimately, I wake up in the middle of the night and think about that shit because it's so fucking awful. Like, there's Cronenberg levels of like body horror / existential horror. It's just like,
yeah, but that's what Hunter x Hunter is. And it is important we establish what the show is for the uninitiated, because these two movies are not that.
No, and in fact,
Simply
like,
put,
even if they weren't that and they were operating on like a cheaper level of being Hunter x Hunter, which they kind of do, the problem inherent with them is that they are so bound to making you think that they're trying to be like the show and taking so many elements from it that it like forces you to view it in this weird and constrictive way where like I don't know where they were in the show when those movies came out specifically.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up, but I'm
but
sure we could find it out.
but the thing is about both of them is that like obviously the manga had gotten pretty far at this point still, but the thing is that these movies would have suffered even more, in my opinion, when they came out because the things that they borrow from the show that are like repeats of what happens in it happen closer. Because like we watched this in 2020 and we were both put off by how the fact that both movies here have specific character arcs that characters in the show go through, and those character arcs happen quicker back in 2013. So this had to have just happened, which makes less sense to me.
Yeah. No.
Oh God. Let's get into the movies proper. The first one we'll talk about is Phantom Rogue. Is that it?
Phantom Rogue. Yep.
Yeah, Phantom Rogue is the first movie, and in my opinion, at least, I mean, this is comparing how big of a shit you find on a carpet, but like there is one notably smaller shit, and it's this one, I guess.
Yeah.
It's, like the movie's not even fine. The movie's bad, pretty bad, in fact, mainly due to the fact that it's just slapdash. It's just these movies are so disjointed, and it's so apparent that the people who made these have no true appreciation for the show is and what the show does. And even like you can get by on fan service. It's just that these movies don't even have that. They just sort of like, oh, it's like an offshoot little story, and it's like, okay, sure.
And so, just for context, when this first movie came out, we were 62 episodes deep into the show itself, with the episode Reality and Raw airing a day after in Japan after this movie was released to theaters. Reality and Raw being an early part of the Greed Island arc.
So we had just moved past Heaven's Arena and York New.
Which is important to establish because this movie is just trying to essentially rehash York New, but worse.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you inherently doing this in a 90-minute movie is going to cause problems because one of the best things about Hunter x Hunter is each of its arcs, very specific, very definitive. They're all beholden to different genres and different characters, and it's just literally a story that is based off of the whim of what the creator wants to do. It's Togashi, like, I feel like in another universe that this, like, Togashi would have just made all of these into different manga projects because I feel like they're that versatile. But he's got these specific moments and they just sort of last however long they need to. Like you have York New, which, at least to my memory, is like 24, 25-ish episodes.
York New's 25 episodes.
And Heaven's Arena is a little bit less than
Heaven's Arena is like 10. The first arc is like also like 25 episodes, I think.
And, Chimera Ant arc, many episodes.
It's like 63 or something.
The point being here is that these stories are all as long as they need to be. They're paced out and they have these characters and it doesn't short any of them. So, doing it in a 90-minute movie and not even explicitly adapting the arc, just doing the character arcs that they do is something that's going to be rushed, but it's not impossible. You can do that. But the problem is that it's portraying them like they didn't already go through these things.
Yeah, and this is, I think, most apparently a problem in Phantom Rogue more so than fucking Last Mission.
Yeah.
Just because Phantom Rogue happens chronologically, and it should be mentioned, neither of these movies are technically canon.
Thank God.
But this film happens chronologically directly after York Knew.
So it's not
And
even like it came out.
but
It's
in
not even like it
between
came
Greed
out then.
Island. And this is stupid because there's like literally zero downtime between these two events.
No.
But it gets worse with the next one, and we'll
Oh,
talk about that. But this,
that's the main difference, is that the character arc repeating happens in both of these, but in different ways. Is that
yeah,
this is doing a character arc that already happened in York New, and the other one is doing a character arc that happens later in the Chimera Ant arc. Um, so this movie, Phantom Rogue, setup wise, is kind of like a pseudo exploration of the origin story of the character of Kurapika, who I haven't mentioned just because Hunter x Hunter has a very large cast, and really the only through lines are Gon and Killua, but like the amount of time where the story is actually about Gon and Killua is like maybe 50-50, all things considered. Like Gon and Killua in York New, they're there, they experience part of it, but that
and
is a story about Kurapika.
and quintessentially, yeah, that's they are. And what's so important about that arc is that they are useless to the story and
Mm-hmm.
do nothing, but that's the best thing about them because it motivates them to become stronger characters later down the line.
That's the entire foundation of the Greed Island arc as a whole. It's like, yeah, Gon is trying to see if he can get to his dad, but Greed Island, half of that's a fucking training thing with fucking Bisky.
Yeah,
Like that's just what they're trying to do.
that's like most of that arc is them perfecting their abilities, and that's also one of the only arcs that like ends on a positive note as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that.
It's the sort of self-improvement thing you find in stuff like Dragon Ball, but I think it does it smarter because A, it devotes more time to it, and B, it's just sort of like having these characters witness and be useless feels very tangible because it's like they obviously want to help their friend and they can't, and they make you like revel in that. You're just experiencing Gon and Killua trying desperately to help this person they care about. Meanwhile, they are descending into this horrible, tragic spiral of revenge and anger and like all this stuff. And Kurapika's a great character. Like just of the people in the show, I think he's one of the most well realized characters, just from a very like basic construction point, is that he's kind of like Gon in the respect that he's very typical shonen anime boy, but then Togashi, being who he is just like, well, we can't just have him just be that. No, 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 no. Let's his motivation and the foundation for his character, which is really why this movie pisses me off, is that it just sort of takes away the mystique of the show's conscious decision to only have what we know about him and his backstory be implied and said rather than shown, which I always liked just because it gives me enough
I
details and
mean,
it's like I don't need to see
and
it.
the thing is that that first episode is all the detail you need, where he just like challenges Leorio. He's like, I'm gonna kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you need to get what happened. And the rest doesn't matter. But
Nope.
taking away the mystique of that, as you make the point of, is so counterintuitive. And also giving him this like, because at the beginning of the movie we're introduced to this weird friend character
Mm-hmm.
who is literally the most useless character in all of anime ever, because he has we get this whole like 15-minute scene setting up the backstory and their friendship, and then he's in like 15 seconds of the rest of the movie, and it's like, why did we even have that scene?
The movie plays it up like they had some sort of falling out from when they were kids, and that there's supposed to be like, if this was a normal movie written by humans, there'd be a reconciliation later, and there isn't. It's just set up that
He's
they were
just
there.
like a doll. He's just a doll, and they strip this character of like any interesting ideas it could have. Like, what if there's another actual survivor who is working with the Phantom Troop? What if, like, any idea you could have is reduced to, no, he's just an evil clone,
And it's
and that's
just
it. Why?
I think too, it's just like Kurapika's backstory too is that he belonged to a clan of people who were just sort of like they had like a very specific way of life. They're like and we I still object to being shown it, but there's also so much potential that you can show the inner machinations and culture of the Kurta clan, and they're just like a bunch of fucking guys in the woods. Like there's nothing explained about them. I don't.
It's like the same energy as like the Star Wars prequels, where it's just like a bunch of old dudes in a temple, and it's like,
Okay,
that's the Jedi Order, really? You couldn't think of anything more creative or interesting?
sitting on fucking futons in a circle. Are you
It's just
fucking
like,
kidding me?
and it's like this whole problem a lot of sci-fi has, where it's just like this idea that like, oh, the universe is run like a bureaucracy. It's like the least interesting path you could
Two have
take.
seen Terry Gilliam's Brazil. It's just like, well, you're not going to be better than that, so stop.
But it's the same general idea of the least interesting, most played out idea for their culture being taken.
Yeah, and like the compelling thing about Kurapika is that he's the last surviving member, and that the reason they were killed was because they have like their eyes are like a commodity that can be like stolen and like sold to people, because Hunter x Hunter has this weird sort of underbelly black market thing of just people operating in the shadows constantly. Underneath every single system is this corrupt counterpart to said system.
And it's also this interesting commentary on real world animal poaching, but applying that to humans, and it becomes completely messed up and interesting.
Yeah, and this is what the York New arc is built around. It is Kurapika finally getting the stage to be set, because the entirety of Heaven's Arena, which I would say is a toss-up between like it's popular to say Greed Island is the worst arc, but if I had to pick my least favorite, it's probably Heaven's Arena, and that's mainly because it's a lot of it's dedicated to, albeit very necessary, setup of its mechanics with Nen, which is maybe the best like anime magic system ever. But like once all the characters know that, that's like Togashi's excuse to take these ideas and run with them, because you have Kurapika who's developing this system of how to catch these people, and it relies on a very specific set of rules and circumstances that he establishes for himself that are indicative of him as a character and what he's doing. And it's a constant shift of like, you just don't know how like sane he is the whole time. You're just like, oh, he's trying to kill these people because they killed his family. Obviously, like I know that's not necessarily a revenge always bad or whatever. It's like, but I get it. But then there are moments he has in that arc that are brilliant, where it's just like, I think he took it over the line there. I think he went a step too far.
There's brilliant moments like that, and that whole dynamic is completely thrown away in this film, because rather than Kurapika tracking down this guy who killed his family and has now stolen his eyes, because this guy's stupid Nen ability. And that's the thing about,
I hate that shit so fucking much, because like Hunter x Hunter, this dark show, this violent show that is Killua rips a man's heart out in the first arc of this show, and it's rad. And there's way more violent shit that happens down the road. And in this, I remember so very specifically that people just like, they steal their eyes like their eyes on like a Mr. Potato Head doll. They just be like, yoink. And it's like, it's not like bloody or gruesome. It's just like, oh, his eyes are gone. It's
no, like if we saw the moment where it like screamed out in pain from that would be like, whoa, this villain means business. But it's like, no, what? It's stupid.
And basically they fridge him. That's it's like, you take Kurapika and this arc that is ostensibly supposed to be about him, and you shove him in a hospital bed in the first 15
because
minutes.
He's just a character who is too powerful in comparison for the Gon and Killua story this movie stupidly wants to tell.
They were in a backseat for a reason, and it reeks of like people who were making this movie just being like, oh, well, Gon and Killua are the main characters, so they're the main characters here.
They're on the box. We gotta do it.
It's what it says on the tin. And it's like, no, the reason they had a dramatic implementation, but even if you want to do that, sure, fine, whatever, I guess. You fridge Kurapika instantly, and I remember we both got a very good laugh out of like the first thing that happens is they have this conversation with Kurapika and how he got his eyes stolen. He's laying there and he's blindfolded. And then eventually he just goes, I see. It's like fucking close up with him.
It's like, I remember that part. It's so funny.
It's like the only time these movies approach funny bad and not infuriatingly bad.
It's like freaking people die when they are killed. Levels of
fucking
stupid.
Perfect. And then the second act of this movie, it's like the first act is just, it's set up. You got to find the dude who stole Kurapika's eyes.
And the way they find him is the stupidest thing ever. Basically, like, Kurapika can still see out of his eyes, and he can, like, see the mountain range where this guy is hiding, and from that Gon and Killua deduce the location where he's hiding, and they go by themselves, and it's the stupidest thing ever.
I fucking forgot about that. They like trace a map of the mountains that he sees, and they like try to find the location via that line.
And there's like this like really distinct, I think it was like a moon-shaped mountain or something. And they're like, this. And they have like a 5-minute scene dedicated to them finding like the most blatantly obvious looking mountain ever. And it's so dumb.
It's just like, why didn't you just say that you saw the mountain and then go there? And it's also, in a weird way, this tiny thing is so emblematic of what's wrong with it, is that it's just such a small thing. And it's like, what does Togashi do? He takes the things that should be the least interesting part of shows and makes them the most interesting part of shows. So he would have done that in a really clever and interesting way. Meanwhile, this is just bullshit. Like, they just spend time on it. And I'm just like, why didn't you just tell him to go to a place, and then you lose like 5 minutes off this movie? And then they meet that fucking person there who does the weird "I'm androgynous and you think I'm a boy but I'm a girl" thing.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know, she had like puppets, and I remember distinctly immediately I was like, okay, she's in some way related to the main villain. And she was, because this is a predictable movie written by hacks.
It's like immediately you see them and you're just like, this is a fucking anime little sister. And the second you realize this, you're just like, oh, okay, so the little sister is going to be complicit in like the bad behavior of the villain older brother, and this is going to be fucking, it's fucking Garrett Jacob Hobbs from Hannibal. It's just the same shit. And then they fight some fucking dude, like these, I think they have something to do with the flicks. I think, does like Uvojin show up?
Yeah. Okay. So this is an important detail, because the main villain can create, his Nen ability is he can create like soul dolls. If he uses like the eyes of dead, he has to have the eyes of dead people to make these soul dolls, which can then use their those dead people's Nen abilities. And here's what's stupid about that and why this movie makes no sense. Because the first soul doll he summons is Uvojin, even though Uvojin was just killed in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere by Kurapika. And no one knew where his body was buried except Kurapika, except fucking Omokage, who just deduced the location of his body and dug up his eyes somehow. Like, it makes no sense how he found his eyes. Like, you shouldn't have these.
And so, of course, it's like, again, this is an opportunity for fan service, just because, people like Uvojin. He's got like a really, he's got like a really iconic, in terms of the series, like death scene, like Kurapika versus Uvojin, like that entire fight. It's one of the best fights in the show.
One of the best fights, and it's such an awesome moment.
It's fucking terrific. And they show up here, and it's just like, I'm not against it in theory, but in practice, it's just like, can you be like a little less lazy? Like 2% less lazy, and then I can be like, sure, fine, okay, whatever. But like, you could have just had this guy's power be something different, because it's like, that's the thing with Hunter x Hunter, is that you can just make shit up and find a decent enough explanation as to why it fits in the world. And I mean, you don't have to be Togashi to do that, but just be a little creative, like a tiny itty bitty bit. It's not that hard. But they fight them, and sure,
some members of the Phantom Troop show up for like 6 seconds to kill a bunch of other dumb Phantom Troop. To kill a bunch of other fan service characters. Soul Doll Phantom Troop, I don't fucking know.
Stupid ass. And then the third act is when the movie gets like from being pointless and like meandering into like actively bad. When I believe Killua and Gon enter like
they go to this church, And
yeah, that's it.
It's there where like a soul doll Illumi attacks Killua,
Which is
but
supposed to be a reveal, by the way, is that we're supposed to think it's Illumi the whole time,
it's
and
like no, it's obviously not.
we know, and it's doing this thing where, just like with Kurapika, it's trying to do Killua's arc from the first arc of the show, slash the first like sub arc with the Zoldyck family. Is that the deal with Killua is that he's an assassin, he's a child, and he's super duper powerful, and he comes from a family who are all assassins in like all these weird different ways, and he has the backstory of being like all of his family was abusive to him, psychologically, emotionally, physically. Like, this kid has been through the ringer, and Gon is like this beacon of light that he just sort of latches onto. And throughout the course of that first arc, it's him learning to break away and be like, I can be better than the person my family thinks that I am, and I can be more like someone who would be a friend to someone like Gon.
And also notably, this arc is fulfilled and completed in Chimera Ant,
where it tests that, and it's just like you have this friendship that's proven, and he moves past his family, and like that's a really meaningful, powerful thing. And then you have he's like, oh, I'm with Gon now, I've moved past my family, Gon is like my rock and everything, and I'm gonna be here just because he's here. And then it tests that in the Chimera Ant arc, where it sees just how loyal he's willing to be, and whether or not he can draw a line.
And it builds off a statement his father Silva Zoldyck makes, where he's like, if you ever betray your friends, you have to come back and work for me for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Which is why the Hunter Chairman election arc that follows is kind of like a stealth candidate for one of, at least that's not Chimera Ant arc. I think that's one of the really more interesting arcs of the show.
Oh yeah,
just because
it's two systems breaking down and being tested at once.
Yes.
In a very fascinating way. But
yeah, and you see Killua go through all of this, and basically this movie just tries to do that arc in the span of 5 whole minutes, where Illumi shows up and does this exact same thing, where he's just like, oh, you're going to be bad forever, blah 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 blah, and it's like we know, we did this, we've been here before. And then like Killua is like reacting to all this like it's this revelation. It's just like, dude, you like, why are you surprised that he's saying this shit? That's why the first arc of Hunter x Hunter is great, is because it's just like half of it is a really well put together fucking like shonen start, and then the other half is this great character study of Killua, who's this person who you don't really think much of at first, and then he slowly reveals to be one of the most layered characters in a show that's full of layered characters.
Yeah,
it's like, why are we just retreading this old ground here with him? Killua was such a great character. I feel like you could just like toss or pick a conflict out of a hat and make it work for him somehow. So why do this again?
But yeah, we retread this arc. So then we can have this big dumb fight at the end of the movie where he goes to the castle and to Omokage's castle and confronts him. They beat all the soul dolls, except they don't do it on their own because their powers suck, and they don't realize that the interesting part is that their powers suck. And then Phantom Troop comes and they kill Omokage. They all have a
big old, and that's the thing too, is like it could have had this big cool fight. It doesn't. The fight's stupendously lame. Also, these movies, like, they don't look bad, but my God, they're a far cry from good. Why does the show look so much better?
They're like TV quality movies, and they aired in theaters.
And then the show is a movie quality TV show.
Yeah.
And, like, how do you do, like, you couldn't have thrown like $5 extra at the key animators for like a couple cool sequences? Like, no, you don't get anything. And the fights in Hunter x Hunter are great because they're incredibly infrequent, so when they happen, they're a big deal. Like the fight with one of like most iconic ones is Gon first getting to take on Hisoka in the fucking Heaven's Arena.
Heaven's Arena. That fight's awesome.
That fight's great, and it's simple. Like, it's just these two people competing, and it's like there's this great dynamic of how Hisoka's basically so stupendously overpowered. He has nothing to worry about, but he doesn't want to like hurt Gon. Like, Hisoka is basically a groomer, but not sexually. Like, physically, he wants to groom Gon into being a rival for him. So,
Oh yeah,
there's a lot at play.
And it's so interesting because like in every fight you care about the characters, and the problem with these movies is the villains suck.
Oh,
They are like completely uninteresting.
look up the character design for the villain in this, and you see that, and you're just like, yeah, he looks like he would come from an anime movie that
Like
just somebody fucking made.
he Omokage, I only remember his name because I've looked it up so much.
I was gonna say I was shocked that you even knew that.
No, I'm just on the Hunter x Hunter wiki, and he is the only name that comes up a bunch, and it's like, okay, he's the main villain, I guess. But
And
yeah,
it sucks on its own too. Like it's, we're obviously comparing it to something that's incomparable in many respects, but like it takes place too far into the show to stand on its own anyway. Like if you're somebody who isn't familiar with these movies, there's no reason to watch them. And I'm not even saying that because I don't like them. I'm just saying that because you wouldn't get anything out of them.
No.
I mean, I don't, but like it would be like the equivalent of watching one of the Bleach movies to get into Bleach. There's just no transcending of like your thoughts are going to be completely different, but connected to it, that's why it fucking sucks, man. Is that like you have this villain character who's nothing, and the villains, and I say villains loosely, the antagonists in Hunter x Hunter are so well written that very few of them can legitimately be called villains.
I think the only one is Genthru, the bomber guy. Like he's the only one who's like a straight villain, and like he's someone who's actually just actively doing evil things, like objectively bad things to people.
And he's considered the show's weakest villain, which I really wouldn't disagree with. Again, a lot of aspects of Greed Island that I really ride for. He's definitely the weak link of that, but I still think he's an okay villain. He's far from a mediocre bad one. And he also has one of the best fights at the end of Greed Island.
Oh yeah, that's worth it.
Awesome. That's worth it altogether. But like you have these antagonist characters, like literally everyone in the Chimera Ant arc. You have Meruem, you have Neferpitu, you have Yuppie, you have the fucking, what's the other?
Shia Poof. Who's
Shia
actually the main villain of that arc. If
the main villain and one of my fucking favorite fictional villains. Yeah. Just like across any medium, he's so fucking fascinating. I could write an essay about that.
Yeah, to call him a main villain, like once again, he's acting within his own interest. So in a way that's not like inherently villainous. It's just because the characters he's acting against are the characters we perceive as our heroes. He is inherently the villain to the audience.
And that's what the Chimera Ant arc is about, is that it's just like it has these race of hyper competent killing machines who are going to commit genocide and like overthrow the world. And then you're just like, oh yeah, these are bad guys. And then the whole show is just like, oh, but humans are exactly the fucking same. And you're just like, I guess you're right.
But
there's none of that here.
Yeah, and that's even more a problem in the second movie, but we'll address that after we. I mean, should we just wrap up this first?
Yeah, movie? I mean, there's nothing more to talk about just because it ends so anticlimactically. It's just like,
it's just like the church is in, burns down, and the stupid soul doll girl like sways his heart into being like, you don't have to be evil, brother.
And then he's just like
okay. I will die now.
I must go now.
Yeah.
Fucking. I mean, it's just its main crime is being benign. Like you could at least entertain me, or even if you're doing things that actively infuriate me, you could at least be like Conqueror of Shambhala, where the animation goes stupid hard, and it does not here.
No. But yeah,
I gave the movie like a very generous, in my opinion, a very generous 3 out of 10 because there's really nothing going for this. Honestly,
I would have to agree. Score wise, it's like a 3 out of 10. It's not
skeletal.
There's just so little talk about it. It's a nothing film.
And if you thought that we were being harsh on that movie, let's segue into the last mission, which I remember we went to so optimistically because we were just like, even if this is like kind of bad, at least it won't be boring like the last one. And then it was bad in the very specific way that made us pissed off.
And it was also boring.
And it was also boring because you just, well, I mean, the premise of the last mission is that fucking like everyone is in this art or in this movie for like no reason. Like everyone throughout the series just shows up here. Okay,
Like
fine, whatever. Like
we have
Netero is there.
like Netero. There's like a cameo from Pariston for like
Yeah. Oh,
6 seconds, which
it's
is
so funny because we made a joke about seeing Pariston, and then
like
there's just this cut to him and he just like looks at the camera and then it's a cutaway and that's it.
and we made a joke about this because we were like, who else can we shove in this movie for no reason? And he's in there for like, yeah, no reason. But
Which is like, like maybe fan service. Not a lot of them are involved or whatever, but the plot description here I will read from Letterboxd. Isaac Netero, who is the chairman of the Hunters, decades ago sealed away Jed, a hunter who had mastered the use of On, the dark shadow of Nen. Now on users have reappeared at the Heavens Arena Battle Olympia tournament. For Netero, this is the last mission to protect the association and the world from a threat driven by hatred and the thirst for revenge. And he's going to need all the help he can get in order to succeed. And this does two things. I mean, it basically does everything wrong that the last movie did, in that it's disjointed, boring, poorly animated, poorly structured, and just nothing about it works.
So yeah, everything we said about the last movie applies to this movie. If you really care about hearing every criticism, watch that segment again and you'll get it.
The two main things that this does horribly wrong that make it measurably worse than the first one are two central conceits here. A, the dark Nen. B, the fact that this, unlike this doesn't try to be York New, it doesn't even try to be Heaven's Arena. This tries to do one very specific part of the Chimera Ant arc,
which had not aired. A part of the show.
Which can you imagine watching this movie before you get to see that? I would be livid. I mean, I was livid and I didn't.
Oh so, yeah, we were both furious.
And I know that Hunter x Hunter is a very long show that not a lot of people have the commitment for. And generally, I think most of our viewers might not necessarily be people who have seen it. But the character arc of Gon in the Chimera Ant arc specifically is basically...
Which I don't think we will spoil the whole of, just because it's so good.
It's because I feel like I would be taking away an experience for you if I described it in any detail, because there's just no way it would be worth not sitting through that 50 episode long period to get to it, just because it is totally worth it. But the character arc that Gon goes through in the Chimera Ant arc this is a show with a lot of top tier moments, and I'm pretty sure the thing that everyone thinks of when they think of the Chimera Ant arc, Meruem notwithstanding, because that he definitely gets a lot of love, but is the Gon stuff, very specifically a very, very harrowing scene involving Killua and Neferpitou. That's the best moment in the show. It's one of my favorite moments in anything that's ever happened. And this movie just decides to be a movie that does that in 90 minutes and so much worse.
So much markedly worse than the actual show.
Mm-hmm.
I can't... It's such an unprecedentedly bad thing that happens. I can't even think of a way to explain this to someone who hasn't seen that moment, because there's just no comparison. It's like if someone tried to do, and this is just my best example, my best attempt at this, it's like if someone tried to do the I am your father moment from episode 5 in a sequel spin-off to Star Wars, but have it try to hold the same gravitas.
And fuck man, think of famous hype moments in anime. Think about the progenitor of all this. It's a scene I compare it to all the time, but it's so emblematic of Hunter x Hunter that it's sort of an inverse of it. But the Goku going Super Saiyan for the first time on fucking Namek in Dragon Ball is this moment that's just like, it's been culminating for a long time since the start of the arc, and it's got all of this buildup and all of these things that are happening, and then bam, it happens, and it's awesome. And it would be like if a side movie came out again and was just like, okay, but what if we did all of this except in an hour, and all of it was not emotionally resonant enough to hit, but we're still going to treat it like it is anyway? And like, fucking, I don't see it. Why? What's the point of this? Why are you going to take one of the best protagonists in a story and just do this character arc? Even if that wasn't in the show yet, it's such a fucking lazy way to do this.
It really, that's just the perfect way to describe it. It's laziness. Like the core conceit, and let's address Dark Nen in this same idea of laziness. Dark Nen, or whatever it's called, I don't fucking care. Is the worst. Is like the most hack fraud idea anyone has ever had. It's like, let's make a dark Super Saiyan. Like it's if someone did that in Dragon Ball. It's so dumb.
And Dragon Ball has done basically that with like Super Saiyan God or Super Saiyan Rose, and it's just like, yeah, it's kind of silly, but I don't hate it. And then this, on the other hand, which is just like, and Dark Nen is basically like, I would be okay with this concept if half of Heaven's Arena was not about Togashi incredibly didactically explaining to you the Nen system, which like, is not a bad thing inherently.
No,
I don't want to like poo-poo this because I think Nen is great. It's just that he has to explain a lot of how this system works, because it becomes very important into how these powers are used by the people.
Because Nen, a lot of the conceit of it is about one being able to control oneself, and
it's very Buddhist.
It's Buddhist, and understanding like like physical limitations. And there's also a lot of like making deals within Nen, and
which are cool as fuck. Like Kurapika's, for instance, he has this thing where he's got like this Nen chain around his heart. And basically the deal that he makes like with Nen is that through the sacrifice of his ability to like, he can't use Nen on anyone who is not a member of the Phantom Troop, the group of people that killed the Kurta clan. So basically he is foregoing being able to be violent in any situation that does not involve them. And so he gets a power boost, but also he has to do it in this very, very specific way. And all of these limitations that Nen has are things that become integral or emblematic of a character. Like you can have a character who has an affinity for one part of Nen. It's like broken up into different segments, and they have to find a way, like maybe they don't get along with the thing that they have potential for, and they have to find creative ways to use all of it. And it's super cool.
And that's another thing about Nen, is that you've got a part of it that you have like just that you can attain natural and inherent mastery in, but at the same time, just because you can master that one thing doesn't mean you're not allowed to attempt other elements and aspects of Nen. Like you're able to develop your abilities in other ways, and it's like a very unrestrictive open system. And what Dark Nen does is it throws all
whatever it wants.
It throws it all out the window.
All the rules of Nen no longer apply, and he can just be a manipulator fucking because. And it's like,
he can summon the dark. He can summon the dark cross to overpower someone.
And, you know, if you want to invent something, cool, fine, whatever. But, like, not taking advantage of the fact that this is basically fucking, you know, it's free real estate for making your characters interesting and having them show off having their power completely correlate to who they are. And it totally removes one of the biggest problems in shonen, which is the power creep. which is the phenomenon where the protagonist basically just gets so strong that there's a glass ceiling to the point where, you know, you become Bleach, where after the Soul Society, it's just like Ichigo is unkillable. Like he just can't die, so there's no tension anymore. But with Nen, the genius thing is that everybody can just sort of like, it's not about how powerful you are. Everybody sort of has the same latent energy. It's just how they get to use it.
And
so there's
also,
it's horizontal growth, not vertical growth.
And it's the same thing that's done in JoJo's, where the power system of stands is that there, for every amazing stand there exists one that's the perfect counter to your stand.
Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting just because it's like that's an initial part of the show it is difficult to sit through, but like once you get into the York New, you're just kind of like, okay, that actually did have a purpose, and I'm okay with that. So the Dark Nen reads as being doubly lazy, of just being, here's a thing that I don't have to think about, and so the main bad guy can just like do whatever he wants.
He can summon this giant monster thing that can, I don't know, kill people if they're something or other, if they're not forgiven or some shit.
And it's got like this. See, actually, that's one of the most infuriating things about it, is that like setup wise and conceptually, I can see this movie really working, is that it all takes place in a Heaven's Arena, and like the building gets shut down and locked and everybody's trapped in there. So immediately you have like, okay, you have Die Hard, but what if Bruce Willis could like incinerate people with his, like a palm of his hand? And it's like, okay, that's something. And then you have the people who are the worst concept that it wastes is the antagonist, who the antagonist is a dude who wants to kill Netero specifically because of this opening thing. I'm pretty sure that it's basically just like the power disparity between the two of them basically sets him off, and it's like he's bitter about this essentially. And this can work because Netero, especially in the Chimera Ant arc, is a character that shows them himself to be like, you know, he's the leader of the hunters, and the hunters we see throughout the show, they're not good guys. They're all morally neutral. They can be pretty much whatever they want. So Netero, in a sense, is not like the president of the good guys. He is a showcase that they are just as cruel as they are merciful. So he's very complicated and has a lot wrong with him and a lot of potential for darkness. So not exploring that more through your villain seems really lazy.
Because, and yeah, you've got the perfect opportunity to make this story where you can have the villains be more correct than your heroes, but you just squander that because they end up taking like 500 hostages and start genociding people, which there's another aspect of this movie I just remembered, where it was like there was some stupid part of this where like users of Dark Nen were like put in concentration camps.
Yeah, which is they're trying to do something, and it's like that's not an out of place element that would be on the Chimera Ant arc, because that arc is very political, like very political.
It's also so tactless and graceless that it just doesn't ring as anything that's important or interesting, because you're just getting this nonsensical like there's no humanity to it, in that it just feels like an image you're being shown. And that's something Chimera Ant excels at, that it makes everything real and human to you.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just like, this happened. You have no emotional connection. Divorced, that's exactly the word.
They also do a weird brief thing with Kurapika where they like do the arc that they already did again, in like one scene, specifically,
where he's facing off against the one minion of Jed. That's the main villain's name. The one guy with the long hair.
Yeah,
he's like facing off against that guy, which that guy also has like this copycat shapeshifter ability.
I think so.
Because why not? and they do this dumb scene where it's like Leorio has to stab the real Kurapika or the fake, and
it's literally a who would I shoot is so fucking. It all culminates on like the roof. There's this big fight that involves Gon, Killua, Netero, and Jed, and it's just like it all fizzles out and becomes nothing. Fight any of the action, which there's
like
barely any,
that
is bad.
that's the thing about the action. It just becomes white noise because it's so there's just no sense of who anyone is or what the stakes are, because and this is the other problem with introducing this new power system. It completely nullifies all the tension because you know it's going to disappear and go away by the end of this. Like there's no way there's like a new world order upset because of this. It's like the tension is inherently stripped because you've seen the show and know that Dark Nen isn't a thing that ever continues.
Just and the idea of like repeating great material again, even if it wasn't out then or not, but like the storytelling possibilities of Hunter x Hunter are limitless. You have a world that bows to your whim in a way that's smart. It's basically genetically engineered to be an artist's fucking wonderland. It's the fucking it's the world of One Piece in many respects, which is the only thing I would put on Hunter x Hunter's level in terms of world building, is that both have a very similar approach, and that it's just like the world bends to the will of whatever the author wants to do with the characters, but it does it in a really smart, sensible way.
And Hunter x Hunter also, its world is so big that it's bigger than you even think it is, and that's manga spoilers, so I can't get into that.
Dark continent. And that's it. It's just also on a more like emotional level. This movie like really pissed both of us off.
Oh yeah,
like we're pretty distant from it now, but like I just remember being so like again that moment that it replicates with that happens with Gon in the Chimera Ant arc is like one of the most harrowing, like intense, genuinely frightening things I've like, and it pushed my perception of not just characters in this story and the story in general. It changed the way I thought about like everything. It changed the way I thought about like protagonists and heroes and like all of this stuff.
And also
it's just this one moment,
another brilliant thing it does
all over it.
Another brilliant thing that moment does, which it shits over, is it like it makes you as an audience member really evaluate your connection to like just the power of fiction and how moving it can be.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And this shit's all over that because fuck you.
You're not moved by it. It is an arc that is 100% reliant on the fact that you have spent fucking 70 plus episodes with this character, and you have this really definitive idea of what he is and what he represents, and then the show does this thing that could feel like out of left field and like it's character writing whiplash, and then you think about it and it's like, oh my god, all the signs were there this entire time and I had no idea, and Togashi knew that I had no idea, and that's why he did this.
And then also later in the show it does something else which makes that moment like even more soul crushing.
It's just stacking itself upon self, and it's just these decisions and writing things, and like the way that it sets up for the next arc. Like I love how you just sort of get these two arcs where it's like one is testing Gon's moral fortitude and his connection to his friends, and how that affects how he is as a person and how he is as like an entity with power. And then you have Killua, who was kind of that like amoral misanthropic killing machine, acting on the one good instinct that he knows he has, having to prove himself. So it's this great back-to-back contrast, and here it means nothing. There's none of that. Like you can touch off of the dynamic between like these two characters play off each other so fucking well, comedically, dramatically, thematically. They're such great little characters to follow along because they have a clashing sense of personalities, but also an undeniable chemistry that is only captured very, very rarely, I think. Like, I can't think of a duo in any medium that I think are as well captured as Gunn and Kahlua are.
Yeah.
So you could just make the whole movie just be about them trying to get through this situation, and instead you just add all of this superfluous nonsense, and it's like,
yeah,
there's no excuse for this.
And
None.
it also ties into that earlier thing we were saying where it's like every character needs to be in this movie.
Shoehorned, like all of the Phantom Troop
like,
is there for like whatever reason.
We've got like Wing Bisky, Zushi in here.
Fucking Bisky like, showing up is so fucking weird. It's just like, what? Seeing you in Heaven's Arena is weird. This doesn't make sense to me.
And also, like, you've got all of the floor masters of Heaven's Arena there.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't even remember half of those guys. And it's just like, this fan service doesn't really mean a whole lot when you're pulling out people that I don't think people much care for. Is Hisoka in this? He has to be,
he
surely.
Is. Because he has that moment with Leorio.
Yeah. It's, of course, have to throw in fan favorite Hisoka, who, like, I don't know. This is, I think I said it best in one of my reviews, is that these movies epitomize what normal people who aren't into the medium of anime think anime is. And this is the type of movie that makes me understand that mindset on some level, because it's like, if this is your first exposure to this, why the fuck would you continue with it? Which is a shame, a damn shame.
I mean, I can only hope that no one has seen this as like their first experience with this.
Thankfully, on Letterboxd, these movies are woefully unpopular, and I hope it stays that way unless you're just morbidly curious and really need more. That's the thing, though. There's so much of Hunter x Hunter, manga and anime. Even if you expend yourself completely, go fucking read and watch Yu Yu Hakusho. Just do that. Don't waste your time with these. This isn't like... I'd say this is even slightly, I'd give it the same score, but I would deem it to be slightly lesser than something like Earwig and the Witch, because it pisses me off in all the same ways. It's just that, like, you know, all more power to Ghibli, obviously responsible for so many of my favorite works of art, is that they never took that movie never took a shit on anything as much or as I loved as much as the Chimera Ant.
Yeah.
So, which I guess goes into scores, and this is the lightest 2 ever.
Yeah,
like, it's
2.
I feel like for it to be a 1, it would have to pull like one more punch to just really insult me, and it doesn't quite get there, but god damn, it gets close. So close. Ugh.
Yeah.
So yeah, go watch Hunter x Hunter, the thing we've been talking smack about. Hunter. Oh god, read the manga. Or, you know, I haven't really seen the original 1999 anime, even though I think it aired for a pretty long time. It has like 60 episodes.
It actually has like 100, because a lot of those are hidden in OVAs. And it got up
so
to
that
end.
Gets to Yorknu, doesn't it?
Yeah,
surely.
It actually gets to the end, like right before Chimera Ant.
Interesting. Probably for the better in all respects, but I mean,
if only because it would have been like fillered to shit.
Yeah. And I don't trust anyone other than like someone at the top of their game to direct the second half of that arc in any way that would be entertaining other than Madhouse at this point, because it's just like, I don't know how you guys did it or what fucking genie you consulted to make this shit go down the way it went down, but kudos, because I don't think anybody else could have. But that's it. That's just, don't watch anime movies is the point.
Yeah.
Unless they're like original or they're like direct adaptation or something. Like, you know, you have like something like Ghost in the Shell or even Ghost in the Shell 2, you know, movies worthy of artistic merit. There's that's the worst thing about these. They're fucking artless. There's no passion.
It's just a pulseless, lame fart.
Which is insulting in and of itself, because I think the ethos of Hunter x Hunter is it's just like Togashi's so clearly in love with the story he's telling and the characters that he's writing. And he's just like, it's so exuberant and so obvious that this is something that someone very passionate made. So this feels so antithetical to that I can only feel like deeply insulted by it, weirdly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of all I got.
Yeah. Well,
tune into our next episode where we probably talk similarly about Evangelion.
Yeah.
A lot of similar problems, honestly.
But yeah, thank you for watching.
Look forward to our next episode.
This has been a nightmare.
Yeah, and we're about to watch a white mare.